you all for joining us today. You know, there has been a lot said about big tech censorship of what transpired around the origins of the COVID-19 virus and where this came from, how it moved to a pandemic. We know that Facebook recently reversed their decision on taking down any kind of information that said it came from the lab in Wuhan. YouTube had previously announced that it would censor any content that contradicted the Beijing-run and China-funded World Health Organization. YouTube even took down a video from some medical doctors who were questioning the value of these lockdowns and were questioning what it does to the population and especially what it does to our children. Twitter, they locked down the account of a virologist, a Chinese virologist, who was saying this is what they're doing, gain-of-function research, this is what they're doing in the Wuhan Institute of Virology. I will tell you this, big tech has really stepped over, they have stepped over the line on this one. We all have suggestions of how we as a Senate should move forward and things that we should do to make certain this never happens to the American people.
And for as much havoc as this has created, not only for our own country, across the world, and when you talk about big tech being mum on the subject, basically, and I think it's for them to step up and lead the charge. They are the place that people look to, listen to. Where are they at?
And all the national journalists were reporting that the United States scientists were investigating this new novel virus. And when I talked to the CDC, they said, well, we've got scientists in Beijing, but they're thousands of miles from Wuhan, so we really don't have anything to tell you. And then the next thing I see is this a letter signed by a group of scientists who have ignored even the possibility that this virus could have risen from the laboratory. And then national journalists, big tech companies, that they work together to suppress this story. They work together to censor those of us who thought that this virus may have originated there. And not only did they suppress, they actually shamed people who thought that this might have came from a laboratory. And then finally, we see in Dr. Fauci's emails a collusion, working with Dr. Fauci, big tech working together to suppress this story. You know, we're never going to get to the bottom of this unless we stop this cover-up of the Wuhan lab leak until we stop Batgate.
I want to point out that the evidence about a potential lab leak theory has been hiding in plain sight for months. You know, the fact that our federal agencies, under the direction of Anthony Fauci, funded this type of research for years has been laying out there hidden in plain sight for months. Shame on the media, shame on the social media for not paying attention to it, for completely ignoring it. The result of this 18-month gap of fully exploring the true origin of the COVID virus probably means we'll never get to the bottom of it. China's had 18 months to destroy this evidence. But make no doubt about it, China is guilty. They are culpable. They knew they had a coronavirus. They knew they had a deadly pandemic-type virus in Wuhan. They didn't allow flights out of Wuhan to the rest of China, but they let that virus infect the entire world. I think we also need to hold the news media and the social media accountable as well. This isn't the only area of suppression. I could list a long list of false narratives, false stories that the drive-by media promotes and then never really adequately retracts. But when it comes to COVID, I have personal experience with censorship and suppression that I believe has cost tens of thousands of Americans their lives. Why did our health agencies, why did Anthony Fauci, why did the mainstream media suppress and censor doctors who had the courage and compassion to treat patients early with cheap, generic repurposed drugs. Why did that happen? There is growing evidence. It's not being reported on by the media, which is why I believe the news media will never admit their complicity and why they will never admit they were wrong here. But it's not too late. Lives can be saved.
Thank you, Senator Blackburn and others. Last quarter of a century has seen enormous growth in the internet, and much of it's been positive, as we all know. But the result of this quarter century has been that it has allowed a handful of internet big tech platforms to grow enormously large, enormously rich, and enormously powerful, to the point where they decide what is the news. They decide what information the public is going to get and what information is going to be blocked. And it's not just the Wuhan virus, which is an outrage, as my colleagues have just described. We could cite chapter and verse time and time again about these big platforms deciding what we will hear and what we can't hear. So Google threatened to cut off several conservative websites, including the Federalist. How do they have the power to do that? How can they justify doing that? Companies restrict or terminate conservative users' accounts and content on social media. Facebook announced it's suspending the account of a former president of the United States. That is too much power for them to decide who can and who cannot make news and be quoted. Twitter moved to censor any coronavirus coverage that they thought, in their judgment, might cause widespread panic. How does a multi-rich, powerful internet platform get to make that decision? And I could go on and on and on. That's why I've joined with senators like Senator Blackburn in trying to correct the Section 230 gaps, but also why I'm introducing legislation to make it clear that these large internet tech platforms cannot discriminate based on their own opinions and based on what they think the public should and should not be allowed to hear. This is a serious, grave threat to freedom and the open exchange of ideas under our Constitution, and I'm glad to stand with these members on this task.